Good evening, everyone. I am BGM, and I'm here to discuss TalkNet, specifically my findings after much use of it and how you can get better results out of it, especially for songs. Before we jump in, I'd like to preface this by saying that we are specifically talking about TalkNet for this video, and having some knowledge of music theory and how audio and pitch works may be necessary for some parts, as I'm not delving into any such topics in detail. If you're looking for advice on music production in a more broad sense, I'd recommend Vol's Survey of Music Production, carded in the top right, which is well edited, comes in a variety of topics relevant to composition and coming up with ideas, and it's only 3 hours. Yes, 3 hours, because if you want to learn this shit properly, it takes time. You're not going to learn how to produce a good song from some asshole's 2-minute video with red circles and shocked expressions in his thumbnail promising instant results. Also, I'm going to be jumping between the talking and singing models a bit, as much of the advice applies to both, so excuse the messy layout. Now, let's get things started by first answering the question, what is TalkNet? TalkNet is an AI-powered audio generator similar to 15AI and the so-dubbed ngrok models. It can turn text input into spoken dialogue voiced by many of the MLP characters. However, it currently has a one-up over other voice models, and that is the acceptance of reference audio. What does that mean? It means that you can take a recording of a spoken line, feed it through TalkNet along with a transcription, and it will speak that line with the exact same intonations and pacing as the reference. Anyone who's worked with 15AI or similar will probably know how difficult it can be to get a specific delivery of a line you need, when getting that delivery effectively depends on your own patience and rolling the dice. TalkNet's reference audio feature can potentially drastically reduce the amount of frustration on that front, since you can directly tell the model how you want something spoken by speaking it yourself and feeding it to the model. And on top of all that, they can sing. But all of this advice won't do you any good if you don't even know how to access TalkNet. Doing so isn't quite as easy as just visiting a website. However, that is the first step. The link labeled TalkNet in the description will take you to the collab notebook on which TalkNet can be ran. I suggest using Chrome for this, as other browsers tend not to work for this as reliably. Once you're here, you can either click Runtime, Run All, or simply click the play buttons top to bottom. If you receive an error stating it cannot connect to a TPU backend, that means the hardware required to run it isn't currently available, and the best you can do is try again later. Assuming all goes well, the model will take some time to load, around 15 minutes in my experience, before the TalkNet UI opens just under the third step. From here, you can open your session storage, upload your reference audio by dragging and dropping, click the Update File list to make TalkNet find them, select your input from the adjacent list, transcribe it in the text box, select your character, and generate. I should note that the singing voices are at the very bottom of the character list. So, fantastic, right? You can take that entire script, record it on your $5 MP3 player next to a busy street, toss it in TalkNet and get back the perfect result in a character's voice, right? Let's try it and see what happens.
Hey, Anna. Lovely day outside, isn't it?
Lovely day outside, isn't it?
Right. Evidently, there's a bit more to it than that for consistently getting good results. So, without further ado, let's look at what you can do to get the best out of TalkNet with reference audio. For starters, audio quality is important. There was an anon in the PPP threads at one point who had available to him a professional studio recording setup, meaning no background noise and a top-of-the-line microphone. His results with TalkNet reference audio were exceptional.
So I just discovered this whole TalkNet thing, and it's fucking crazy. And I'm actually a voice actor, and specifically I'm a voice actor who specializes in copying the voices of other people for ADR when they can't come in. And after playing around with it for a while, I have come to the conclusion that the better the input quality is, the better the output quality is. So I'm sitting here in a real vocal booth with a Neumann U87. Let's fuck some shit up. Hi, I'm Twilight Sparkle. Fuck you.
I must admit it's been terribly funny to watch all of you wonder, what's wrong with our model? Why does it keep having these weird artifacts? Ha 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 ha. There's nothing wrong with the model. Your inputs just suck.
As you can hear, the results are clean and clear, with little to no robotic artifacting, when fed with audio recorded under the absolute optimal conditions. However, unless you really want to shell out the money to rent a recording studio every time you need to make your horsewife drop an F-bomb in just the right way, this probably isn't a viable option for you. Luckily, there's ways to improve the quality of your inputs without shelling out any money. For one, reducing any background noise where possible, closing doors and windows, turning off any nearby irrelevant devices, reducing your PC's workload to keep the fans calm, anything to get things quiet. The quieter the surroundings are, the easier of a time TalkNet will have picking your voice out from the background. On that note, being close to your microphone is also important. TalkNet generally seems to work better with loud inputs than quiet. Even a tiny bit of peaking is okay. But that's stuff you probably could have guessed. So, let's go over some less obvious things. For one, cutting off any dead space on your inputs. TalkNet looks at the entire inputted audio file for data relevant to what it needs. If there's too much dead space at the beginning or end of your input, especially if there's a lot of background noise, TalkNet can confuse that noise as part of the intended input and potentially deliver worse results because of it. To demonstrate, here's an untrimmed input with way too much dead space at the beginning. Who the heck needs pizza and tacos at the same time? That's just greedy. We throw that into TalkNet and get this in return.
Who the heck needs pizza and tacos at the same time? That's just greedy.
Kinda sounds like Pinky has been guzzling too much, frosting. Now, here's the exact same input run through TalkNet again, but with the dead space cut out of the input.
Who the heck needs pizza and tacos at the same time? That's just greedy.
Sounds a lot better, doesn't it? A little bit of dead space probably won't hurt things, but less is better, so trim those inputs. Secondly, exaggerating your enunciations. If you're speaking too fast or slurring your words, TalkNet won't like it. Imagine you have a particularly anal English teacher grading your pronunciation for the inputs. Clearly pronounce every part of every word to make sure TalkNet can follow along easily. Thirdly, multiple takes. If a line isn't coming out clean, then a simple solution may be to simply re-record a new take of it and try again. You usually won't even need to change how you deliver the line. Simply having a few takes of it ready to go can help if you're not getting the desired output. To demonstrate, here's 3 takes of the same line. You'd already have to be pretty fruity if you like fruitcake. You'd already have to be pretty fruity if you like fruitcake. You'd already have to be pretty fruity if you like fruitcake. As you can hear, they're all delivered in about the same way, and yet, when we put them through TalkNet,
You already have to be pretty fruity if you like fruitcake. You already have to be pretty fruity if you like fruitcake. You already have to be pretty fruity if you like fruitcake.
there's significant variation in the lines that simply isn't there in the reference. This is because the pitch tracking isn't 100% perfect, so having multiple input takes ready to go can help to increase your chances of getting a clean output. Finally, effects. Things like noise gating, denoising, and pitch correction. The names of these effects are pretty self-explanatory in what they do. I won't go into specifics here as they are broadly used effects and I'm sure a proper explanation could already be found elsewhere. Denoising and noise gating can help to keep the model focused on what you're actually saying and ignoring the noise by simply cutting it out. Generally, it's not necessary to go this far for every input, but if you're recording in a noisy environment and there's nothing else to be done about it, this will help. If you're making music, pitch correction is also best to apply at this stage, as significant pitch edits will be much harder to notice if applied to the input rather than the output. Now let's take what we've learned and use it to make a better input for TalkNet. Hey, Anon! Lovely day outside, isn't it?
Hey, Anon! Lovely day outside, isn't it?
Great, that's sounding a lot better. However, there's times when inputs may still not quite work with all this, especially the singing models. You see, TalkNet is not a voice changer. It does not simply modify your input to sound like a character. Instead, it takes a look at your input as a guide on how to deliver a line, then generates that line in the character's voice from scratch, off what it knows about their voice from the datasets it was trained on. This is important because it means that TalkNet cannot do things that the character's voice actor couldn't reasonably do in real life. You can't push a character's voice into a pitch that's higher than they could handle, for example. To demonstrate this, I've recorded a simple singing line that extends across a much larger pitch range than most songs would reasonably require, for the sake of demonstrating it easily. Here we go on testing the PPP, technology advances like you wouldn't believe. This won't output as we'd want it to, but what happens if we try it anyway?
Here we go on testing the PPP, technology advances like you wouldn't believe.
Poor result, as expected. She changes her octave twice and has some weird raspy pitch issue near the end. Each character has their own vocal range they can reach and sound good in, and it's important to keep it in mind and work within it for usable results, especially for the singing models, which track the exact pitch your input is in. So how do you ensure that your input is within the character's vocal range? The easiest way to do that would be to determine your input's pitch and compare it to the viable pitch range of the character you're using. However, you can't really know the viable pitch range of a character without putting several inputs into TalkNet, analyzing the output data, and trying to map out the vocal range of said character and finding at what pitch it starts to fail, and no one wants to do that. So I did that, for the main 6 at least, and I'll show you my findings in a minute. First, a brief description of how I tested this. I recorded 5 different singing lines covering a wide range of pitch and keys, ran them through the main 6 singing models, and took notes of where each character would consistently fail. How I determined the failure point was by noting the pitch at which it started sounding bad and marking that as the model's max. For example, here's Applejack trying to sing the chorus of Not Okay.
Don't you forget this day. The rivers could turn to flames and still Pepsi wouldn't be okay.
We can hear that the high note at the beginning has issues, so we can either compare it to an instrument with perfect pitch to determine what note it is, or analyze it in a program capable of pitch detection, such as Melodyne. In this case, it's about C#4. So we make sure it's consistent with the rest of the tests, and if it is, mark the note 2 or 3 semitones below it as the reliable max pitch. Same thing for the minimum, though we mark 2 or 3 semitones above for that. Here's my results. Applejack was consistent across my testing and seems to have an effective usable range of about E2 to C4. Not bad, and opens lots of possibilities with such a wide range. The extended low range makes her a good choice for backing vocals. Fluttershy was a bit less predictable, with more of the strange metallic noise in places I wouldn't expect. Regardless, I feel confident in stating her range is about A2 to C4. However, with considerable metallic noise past about A3. Pinky, as you would probably expect, is much higher up in the pitch range, with a range of about B2 to E4 from my testing, making her great for high-energy genres like pop and punk rock. Rainbow Dash goes from about G2 to D4. Personally, I find she usually works well for songs in the key of A. Rarity goes from B2 to F4, with metallic noise introducing past C4. Note that Rarity's singing model was actually trained on talking data, giving it a slightly different tone from the other singing models. Some claim her to have more issues because of it, though with my admittedly limited use of her in backing vocals, I've had no more problems than usual. And finally, Twilight, who can reach a range of B2 to D4, though she sounds a bit off from what I would expect Twilight to sound like. Now that's all fine and dandy, however things work a bit differently for the standard non-singing voices. I'm unfamiliar with the exact interworkings of TalkNet, but from what I can gather, the standard voices help with pitch tracking automatically to some degree, by determining the pitch range of your input and aligning that with the pitch range of the character, effectively meaning it copies the delivery and energy of a line without dragging the character too far out of their normal speaking pitch. That of course doesn't mean that it works perfectly. If you're having issues with normal dialogue, just try reading the line again, but reading it in a higher or lower pitch. While it's not as drastic, it does still make a difference for the talking models. You can also try reading in a more monotone voice, which I find helps sometimes if the model is delivering with too much pitch variation or similar. Another aspect of input quality is entirely on you, and that's how the line is delivered. To demonstrate this,
Here's me talking as I normally do, and putting that in as a reference to TalkNet's Starlight model. That sounds fine, but now, let's try again, but this time with some more variation in pitch and dragging out some of our words like Starlight does. Sounds more convincing, doesn't it?
Point being, keep in mind the character who will speak the line. Think hard about how they might say it based on their speech habits and how they are feeling in the context of the story. While we're on the topic of delivery, the singing models don't like words being sustained for longer than a second or two. Hear this.
The sky is calling you.
Notice how it seems to forget the vowel sound it's supposed to be making shortly within that sustained word. This can be alleviated a bit by just repeating the transcription of whatever vowel you want to sustain a few times, like this.
The sky is calling you.
Still not perfect, but better at least. Pronunciation can also be an issue on occasion. Sometimes you may have to creatively misspell words in order to get the model to say it correctly. For example, I find the singing models frequently mispronounce I'm as im, failing to emphasize the I whatsoever. I can usually correct this by spelling it as EYEM instead. Alright, I think I've covered just about everything I wanted to in terms of getting good deliveries out of the model. Now let's talk about some after effects you can apply to the output files using special programs. We'll start with a lovely little audio editor by the name of Isotope RX, which is excellent for audio repair. It has many little plugins that can come into use, but we're going to focus on Dialogue Isolate, which can remove some of the artifacting from dialogue and make it sound more clean. Here's a quick A-B comparison to demonstrate. Listen closely and you'll hear that the take with the dialogue isolation applied lacks the metallic hissing that the unaffected line has.
You can't just tell somebody they're going to be candy and then not have candy. You can't just tell somebody they're going to be candy and then not have candy.
There's many other effects that Isotope RX offers that could be potentially useful, but if I went through every potential application for every effect, we'd be here all day. So let's move on to pitch correction. Even if you're a perfect singer, pitch correction may still be necessary, because as stated before, TalkNet's pitch following isn't 100% accurate. I recommend Melodyne because it causes much less artifacting and distortion from time and pitch changes than any other algorithm I've used. Both Isotope RX and Melodyne can be purchased from their respective storefronts for their respective prices. They're the two I tend to use most frequently. There's much more to cover when it comes to utilizing AI models to their fullest, both for music and other audio content. But I've said all I've wanted to on TalkNet, so if you want to learn more about music production and using models for it, I'll once again recommend Vol's Survey of Music Production. Or, if you want to learn how to better utilize the models in a context outside of music, I'd suggest Clipper and I's Supercharging Your AI Creations section of the PPP panel from last year. Beyond that, I'm going to call this one a wrap. Thank you for watching. And don't let this knowledge go to waste. The Pony Preservation Project wants everyone to be making Pony AI content. I hope to see what you can do. And with that, I bid you farewell.